So, all right, I had this friend growing up. The freshman year of high school, I'm just going to call him Stan. He was a new kid to our school district because his dad just moved to the city where we lived, and we were in the suburbs of, and he just came from an even larger city because his dad got called in to be the new head doctor at a hospital, and so he didn't have any friends, and we both like really nerdy stuff, and we met in science class, and so we kind of became acquaintances. And I was hanging out with him, though, I realized there's very little else that we had in common. One major part was that I was a Christian, he was an absolute atheist, and so that kind of made it hard for us to relate. But what really put this lack of growth and trust together in the relationship was that idea that he just didn't seem to get my life at all. Like I said, he came from a really large city. His dad was a very successful doctor, and he just had kind of an absence of understanding about the way life was where we lived. There were restaurants that were nice, and then there was restaurants that were really nice. The difference between going to Outback and then the place where they only speak in Japanese and they cook the food right in front of you. You guys ever been to one of those places? Well, we had gone to this one really nice restaurant once for my parents' anniversary. And we're hey, that was a pretty cool experience. And the first week that this kid lived there, his family had went out 3 times to different restaurants. And it was wow, we maybe eat out once a month. And I was cool, so what'd you think about it? And he was oh, it was pretty dumpy, just it's nothing back so-and-so where I lived, and I was just oh, yeah, because we think that's kind of a cool place, It's not everybody gets to experience something like that all the time. And then I got invited over to his house, and we were hanging out, and he had his own computer in his room. Now, I have to explain something. In 1999, not everybody had an in-home computer yet. They were becoming the thing. It was pretty normal, but not everybody had them. But it was very unlikely that you had multiple, that you'd have your own for your own gaming in your own room. In fact, if your family had a computer that connected to the internet, it was probably the only one you had because everybody didn't have a router, a modem router that most of you guys have, makes your Wi-Fi around the house so everybody can, connect on their phone, tablet, computer, laptop, wherever. No, you had to plug that one computer into the phone jack to connect to the internet. And his dad could afford to have multiple high-speed internet lines hooked up into the house. And everybody had their own supercomputer with their own private internet line so they could constantly be playing online games and not ever be interrupted. And he was what, you mean you don't have your own computer? I'm no, you're the only family I even know that has multiple computers, a computer in everybody. And it's just he didn't get that. Or when we talked about going to the mall and we hung out and he didn't find anything that he liked there, he was that's all right, I'll just get my mom to take me to the city, next week and I'll buy new clothes. And it was oh, you'll just get your mom to take you to the city, and take you on a shopping spree because you're too whatever for all the stores here. It's just man, I don't think you get what everybody else lives like around you. And it just kind of made this divide in our relationship where we didn't really have a lot of solid trust. And so I didn't feel like he was ever really there for me because he couldn't really get me in where I had been in the kind of life that I live. And it reminds me of this proverb that I ended up having some rough times in high school where I didn't have anybody with me, and so I just felt it was harder. And this proverb says this. If we go over to Proverbs chapter 18:24, it says, "One who has unreliable friends will soon come to ruin. But there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother." Stan was not that friend for me. I did not have that until much later. Actually, as an adult, I had a friend I will tell you about. His name's John. And John was a friend that I made actually before I started working at a certain church where he was a worship leader. And there was a lot of things that we had in common, including our relationship with Christ. And that we had kind of the same approach about a lot of things, about modesty and like belongings and things like that, as well as like interests. And so like it was just like this brotherhood kind of built that like I knew he got me and I got him. And then the craziest thing happened is I was invited to start a youth program at his church, and it was really cool because like, hey, I know you and I know your family, and that was cool to have that connection there, although not everybody I had that connection with. In fact, and sometimes there were a lot of people who didn't see eye to eye with me and caused problems for me. And he was able just to come up beside me. Like, it reminded me of a story from the Bible, if you've ever read about a guy named Jonathan and his armor bearer, where they went into battle just like together, head to head against a bunch of enemies. And he was like, I'm with you, man, heart and soul, all the way. I've got your back. And that's the way I felt about my friend John, because he'd be like, yeah, I grew up going to church with these people. I know exactly what they're like. I get that, man. Me too. And you know, that me too kind of thing is like something that like I missed out with my friend Stan, because he could never be like, yeah, me too, man. I get that struggle. But my friend John could. And that's where this huge difference was. And it kind of helped through a lot of life's problems. Now, we're in this series called Whoever Finds God Finds Life. And we're talking about the gospel. The good news is about Jesus. He helps give us life to the full, is what the Bible calls it. And we kind of have to like dissect that a couple ways to really get what that even means, to get like the full picture. And so in week 1, I got a little review here. In week 1, we just talked about that God helps provide us eternal life. Joy that goes beyond this life. Probably many of you know, like, oh yes, I've heard about God, and if I accept his son for forgiveness of my sins, then that means I can get to heaven someday. And that is true, but that is not all of it. So last week, we started talking about how God makes us these new creations, be able to kick our hurts, habits, and hang-ups that we have. And Mason shared his testimony last week. Well, I want to talk about something this side of heaven that God helps us with, this ability to press on, be encouraged to persevere. So back to the idea of like, you know, how nice it is if you're able to have somebody beside you say, yeah, me too, I get that. A lot of people don't realize that Jesus' life on earth was more than just meant about Christmas. Like, he comes to the baby, you know, he comes down in the manger and we celebrate Christmas, and he's like, oh yeah, then Easter, where he dies on the cross for everybody and rises again. There's 33 years in the middle of that count just as much. A lot of people don't realize that his life offers us all something to relate to. His story is maybe not too different in some aspects to yours. Just jotting down some things that you can read for yourself in the Bible, facts about Jesus' life. He grew up poor, and his family moved a lot. Also, he had a really interesting, messed up sort of like step family situation, because, you know, the guy his mom was married to, you know, wasn't his dad, you know, because it was God. And immediately some of you guys like, whoa, nobody ever presented the Jesus story to me that way. This sounds like something more maybe I can relate to. Or as he grows up, he has to go through a lot of trials. Jesus knows what it's like to be tired. You can read one story about where he has to live in the desert, like alone and without any supplies for 40 days. Jesus knows what it's like to go hungry and just be exhausted. But as he grows older, he experiences a whole lot of other things. He knows what it's like to lose somebody that he loves. A friend of his dies. He knows what it's like to be misunderstood and hated by people. There was a group called the Pharisees who almost purposely misinterpreted every single thing he said just to hate. You know what it was like to be abandoned. He had friends turn on him. Like the moment things started not being all sunshine and rainbows, they just walked out. They just left. And if abandonment wasn't bad enough, he also knew what it was like to be betrayed. There was one friend named Judas who turned him in for a crime that he didn't do that ended up getting him killed. He knew what it was like to actually experience pain, like physical pain, because of the cross. He was wrongly judged. Many of us often feel like we get accused of something that we didn't even do. That happened to him with the Romans. People doubted him. Others put way too much weight on him, thinking that he was going to solve some of their problems, and they were depending on him to pull through, and then guilting him when, oh, you didn't add up to what I thought you were going to be. Even was laughed at by his own family, the Bible says. His own half-siblings. That's some serious, bogus stuff right there. To experience that much stuff, that's a lot of heartbreak. But then when I think about it, we all experience some of that stuff. Everybody will say you experience at least one of those things that, I listed between like family troubles or being abused by a friend or just, a lack of support. We've all been there. But God was there first. Almost in this way of willing to be able to say, I know what it's like. And so there's this guy who sums it all up in a book called Hebrews. And this is the last thing that I will read to you all, and then I'll ask my friend Aaron to come up. The book of Hebrews, chapter 4, verses 15 and 16 says this. I'm gonna break it up into two halves, because this is what's awesome. It says that Jesus is like this, like high priest to us, and we don't have to worry about any more about a spiritual leader not being able to be good enough to relate to us. It says we don't have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weakness. Another way of saying is like who's unable to say that me too and not get it, like the friend that I said. No, in fact, he has been tempted in every way just as we were. Every way, yet he didn't sin. That's like really encouraging on just the front half. Everything that you guys have gone through in your life, you may feel like nobody has ever experienced that, or you feel alone in it, but the good news is that Jesus knows what that is like. And then we go to the back end of it. If you go to the next slide, because I've underlined different parts of it. So we know that God knows what it's like. It says, then let us approach God. Let's go with confidence. It says we can approach God's throne of grace with confidence. Confidence means to be assured, to know, to not be like, I don't know if this is a good idea. I don't know if I can trust this person. I don't know if this is going to work. No, confidence is like, I know you know what it's like. I know that you can help me with this. Walking forward into God's throne room and saying with confidence that we can receive mercy, and it says, find grace to help us in our time of need. So many of you all, middle school is a tough time, where you are going through a lot of different things. Just need to know, the Bible tells a story of when Jesus was a teenager. Okay, Jesus was a teenager too. There's a fight with Jesus and his parents in the Bible. If you don't know this, go look it up tonight when you leave, okay? He knows where you're at and what it's like. He's saying, me too, and I want you to know I've been there, but I'm also right beside you. You don't have to be alone in all this. And as we discuss this month, this whole idea that whoever knows God really has life, this is just another fraction, like a slice of the pie when it comes to that. Because a lot of us, we don't feel like we're thriving in life when we feel like we're alone. But the good news is that because we know with Christ we can thrive, because we know that we're not alone. We know that somebody has experienced these problems before us, but also they are beside us in the middle of it saying, I want to encourage you. You can get through this. I'm here beside you. And it's not just the Spirit of God. Jesus is alive still every day in all of his believers and the people around you. Your classmates, your leaders, they're there to be there beside you in the middle of these times. Even when you don't see it, even when you maybe don't recognize it, he's there to support us. And this is just another way that God is there, and God is giving us life and helping us through this tough time.